ever been involved in preaching or teaching Sunday school in the church? If yes, then you have been involved in what we call exegesis, only that you might not know that what you are doing is called exegesis. Exegesis has a very long history, dating far back into the Jewish period. In fact, some people say it goes far back into the time of Ezra, and some people say it is still even before the time of Ezra. Today, we'll be looking at the history of hermeneutics, and we will start right from the Jewish period, through the patristic era, through the medieval period, and then launching us into the Reformation and post-Reformation, and finally the modern era. It is going to be an interesting thing to study the history of this course. You are welcome to the class. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are going to have our lesson on the history of hermeneutics. I am your facilitator, Professor Lubi Adewale. Now, by the end of this learning session, you should be able to describe each period in the history of hermeneutics. You should be able to identify major hermeneutists in each period. You should be able to comment on the role of each hermeneutist on the formation of the rules and principles of hermeneutics. You should be able to identify the methods of hermeneutic prevalent in each period. And you should be able to use the understanding of the various methods to arrive at a suitable method for today. Now, there are 6 major periods in the history of hermeneutics: the ancient Jewish period, the patristic period, the medieval period, the Reformation period, the post-Reformation period, and also the period of modern hermeneutics. Did hermeneutics begin from Ezra? Take a look into Nehemiah chapter 8 verse 8. And that's why those who think hermeneutics began from Ezra hold on to as their passage. But there are others who believe that hermeneutics predates Ezra and Nehemiah. Now, among the Jews, there are 4 types of hermeneutical method. We call it the literal, the midrashic, the peshar, and the allegorical. Now, the literal method is also called the peshat, and it is the basis of every other type of hermeneutics. It is always assumed that everyone knows the literal meaning, and therefore it's undisputed. Now, the midrashic interpretation was developed by Rabbi Hillel, and it emphasized grammar and context. However, those using this method derailed when they began to put their emphasis on numerical speculations and hidden meanings. Peshar was the most common to the Qumran communities. Now, it borrowed heavily from midrashic exegesis, but included the eschatological figure. The Quran sectarian belief made Peshar to become apocalyptical. Now, allegorical was developed by the Greeks in order to resolve the tension between religious myths and philosophy. It was later adopted by Jews who want a balance between Mosaic tradition and Greek philosophy. Allegorical method holds that the true meaning of scripture is beneath the literary meaning, and Philo of Alexandria was the most popular exponent of this method. Now, the patristic era was the period of the early church fathers. At this period, without much gainsay, allegorical interpretation dominated the church, and various types of allegory was developed, beginning from 3-fold sense meaning to 5-fold sense meaning. And this made people to abandon the literal meaning, and by extension, the authorial intent of a passage. Examples of this period are Clement of Alexandria, Origen, and Augustine. In fact, Augustine jettisoned the hermeneutical principles he developed for allegory. However, 4 of those principles are still in use by hermeneutists today. Now, take some time to think about this and possibly answer this question. Would you accept that hermeneutical methods used in the Jewish and patristic era be used today? Now, wait a minute, this is not just a no or yes answer. It's a question that your answer must be backed up with reasons. Deduce reasons for your answer. Now, medieval period covers 1,000 years from the 5th to 16th century. Now, at this period also, allegory reigned supreme. And allegory is make use of the fourfold sense of scripture: the literal sense, the allegorical sense, the tropological sense, and the anagogical sense. Now, despite the darkness of this period, we have to know that some scholars stand out. And this began with Stephen Langdon, who was the Archbishop of Canterbury and was the one that divided the Bible into the present chapters and verses. Though he conformed to the order of the day by interpreting the Bible to agree with the church doctrine, he held that the spiritual meaning should be emphasized over the literal meaning. We also have Thomas Aquinas, who is also called the angelic doctor or the prince of the scholastics. Aquinas was one of the important figures in scholastic philosophy and one of the leading Roman Catholic theologians. Now, he came into contact with Aristotelian philosophy and integrated this into his own theological thought and produced a distinct theological thought. Thomas Aquinas can be regarded as one of the major figures of medieval era. He took away attention from allegorical interpretation, defended the literal interpretation and the use of grammatical and historical sense as the basis for all other senses of scripture. He adopted the symbolic meaning, since heavenly matters cannot be put in earthly terms. To him, interpreters should deal with literal sense because it could be more easily ascertained and more easily controlled. Nicholas of Lyra. Now, Nicholas impacted hermeneutics significantly. His approach was firmly based on the literal sense. He insisted that the literal must be the basis for all other senses. Nicholas' work influenced Martin Luther so much that Winkler concludes that without Nicholas' influence, Luther would not have sparked the Reformation. Now, Reformation hermeneutics. The Reformation was a Christian reform movement that started in Europe. It's usually dated to begin with Martin Luther's 95 Theses, but it has pre-runners such as Johannes Hus. As a historical period, Reformation ended with the Peace of Westphalia. Renaissance is one of the events that led to the Reformation. Now, Renaissance is a series of literary and cultural movements in the 14th to 16th centuries in Europe, especially Italy, Germany, France, and England. It included the study of great civilizations of ancient Greece and Rome. This also influenced the concept of humanism, and which emphasizes the worth of the individual. Renaissance humanists believed it was possible to improve human society through classical education. This education relied on teaching from ancient texts and emphasized a range of disciplines, including poetry, history, rhetoric, which influenced writing, and also moral philosophy. One of the greatest humanists of the period was Erasmus. Erasmus facilitated the study of biblical languages by publishing the first critical edition of the Greek New Testament. His work was followed by Richlin, who translated the Hebrew grammar and lexicon. This gradually led scholars to abandon the allegorical method of interpretation. Now, the two greatest interpreters of the Reformation was Martin Luther and John Calvin. Now, I want you to take a very close look at this kind of parallelism. Try to draw a comparison between Martin Luther and Calvinism. While Martin Luther gave birth to the Lutheran Church, John Calvin gave birth to the Presbyterian Church. And I want you to compare their belief and the practice of their belief. Now, after the Reformation, we were followed by the Post-Reformation, which was launched actually by the Roman Catholic Church amidst religious controversies. Protestants call it Counter-Reformation. This gave birth to pietists like Jacob Spener. Originally, pietists placed great emphasis upon the study of Hebrew and Greek and the application of scripture to daily life based on grammatical historical interpretation until the so-called adopted inward life. The Age of Enlightenment is also known as the Age of Reason. It gave birth to rationalism. At this period, everything was analyzed and criticized, including the Bible. Philosophers like Thomas Hobbes and Baruch Spinoza thought that reason alone is capable of deciding what is true and false. This led to the development of empiricism. Now, modern hermeneutics grew within this period, and we have the liberal hermeneutism, romantic hermeneutism, existential hermeneutism, as well as the new hermeneutics. Now, under the new hermeneutics, there are two major branches of hermeneutics that are going to be important to us. One is liberation hermeneutics, and the other is African hermeneutics. Have you ever been involved in preaching or teaching Sunday school in the church? If yes, then you have been involved in what we call exegesis. Only that you might not know that what you are doing is called exegesis. Exegesis has a very long history, dating far back into the Jewish period. In fact, some people say it goes far back into the time of Ezra, and some people say it is still even before the time of Ezra. Today, we'll be looking at the history of hermeneutics, and we will start right from the Jewish period, through the patristic era, through the medieval period, and then launching us into the Reformation and post-Reformation, and finally the modern era. It is going to be an interesting thing to study the history of this course. You are welcome to the class.